Going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Sports Scoop, and welcome into really our first kind of mock the mock video here on the channel. Obviously, if you guys are fans of the NFL draft, we will be pumping out a ridiculous amount of videos between now and 9 days until the draft. We have a podcast coming out either the day this is posted, which is later today, or the next day. Kind of have to decide when I want to put that out. Go check out our Path of the Draft episode that was posted before this. That's super fun. We talk about top 5 positional groups like quarterbacks, running, wide receivers, and then we're going to be getting more out. We're going to try and get like I would say realistically 3 more podcasts out to you guys. And in those we talk about hot topics around the NFL draft. We do team mock draft. We talk about positional rankings. Again, a ton of stuff. We post, if you guys want to follow us on social media, they're all below me. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. We post so much content over there as well. And so before we get into the Peter Shrager Mock Draft 1.0, I want to let you know why we do all this work. And that is because this next Thursday, April 27th at 6 p.m. Eastern, we will be going live here on YouTube on this channel for the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. Obviously, super excited. We did it last year. Interactive stream. We go live at 6 p.m. for some pre-draft coverage, giving our thoughts, kind of building up to the first pick, which happens. The draft opens up at 7 p.m., so the first pick's around 7:15, I want to say. We did it last year. Just a ton of fun. A bunch of you guys were in there. We get to talk to the viewers, kind of react with you guys. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure you are here for that. April 27th, 6 p.m. Eastern. We are super excited. We put a ton of work into it. We, work day and night on graphics, getting the stream ready and up and running. So if you guys could stop by, that would mean the world to us. It'll be me, Charlie Nidell, and Serge, our other co-host. So make sure you guys are just checking us out. Check out our other content. But we'll move on to the Peter Shrager mock draft. Super excited for this one. And again, just a guy who has been under fire definitely for this mock, just because of, I'll just move over so you guys see me a little more, just because of, the picks he has here are I guess, a little outlandish, and a lot of players who people don't have mocked in the first round, some not mocked even in the second round. But again, a guy who is very well connected. You look at his first 2 rounds last year of the NFL draft, and a guy who got so many picks right. So this guy's generally pretty spot on, but we'll jump right into it. So obviously, first overall, a pick that's gaining steam and a pick that is starting to get a little more locked in, and that's Bryce Young out of Alabama, quarterback going to Carolina. Obviously, this dude can do it all. Really good pocket passer. The only question mark is again the size, and a thing I don't like to touch on so much because a lot of people do, and I don't think it's really a hit on him. A guy who didn't struggle that much in the SEC will prepare him the most he can for the NFL. He goes to Carolina. They've spent so much money on coaching this year. I think they have a really solid defense. I think they have some other picks in this draft where they can build around him. Again, a pick who we talk about, as NFL draft, people who talk about the draft day in and day out. So I won't bore you guys with that. Then at 2, he has Indianapolis actually trading up with Houston, who, again, a pick that's gaining a lot more steam, that the Houston will not go quarterback. The Colts seem to be locked in to go quarterback here. Obviously, Matt Ryan no longer a part of that. They, were out on Carson Wentz last year. CJ Stroud, again, arguably the best pure pocket passer in this class. Perfect size at 6'4". A dude who really has great touch with the ball. Again, a guy who I always talked about with me, it's the zone coverage. When they disguise it, he gets a little jumpy, a little hesitant. So again, great guy, really good with his feet, strong quarterback, a guy who will really boost the team. Again, for me, it's just how high do the teams have CJ Stroud on the board, and again, if Houston trade down with, again, if Houston stay here, I think for Houston, you wouldn't be super dumb if you don't want to go quarterback. If you stay here, you sit at this spot and you go take Will Anderson, you go take Jalen Carter, and then it would really make the quarterback class interesting. But they go CJ Stroud, again, a pick I like. A lot of people have Will Levis fitting there. A lot of people have Anthony Richardson potentially fitting there. But again, a pick that I do think definitely is worth it. Then at 3 here, Will Anderson is off the board as he gives the Arizona Cardinals a pass rusher I think they desperately need. Again, a guy who Arizona would be so thankful if he fell into their lap. Again, it's a really fun kind of thing to talk about is, say Texans stay at 2, go take Will Anderson. I think a corner could be very likely with the Cardinals here. Again, a trade down could be very likely. I think Will Anderson is who the Cardinals are going to target here at 3. I think it's, super likely he lands here because, you would assume it's 2 quarterbacks with the first 2 picks. Again, generational talent, blue chip guy, fantastic player, Von Miller-like guy. Again, a guy who we talk about so much. The more interesting part of these drafts is as you get deeper in, even the second round, because it's a guy who's a blue chip prospect. This guy is one of the most productive edge rushers we've ever seen, not only at Alabama, but in college football. 34 and a half sacks, I believe, over his career at Alabama. A ton of accolades. This dude will be a fantastic pass rusher, really good extension. Again, all of you guys have heard so much about what Will Anderson would bring to Arizona. So again, I'm a massive fan of that. I think it makes sense here for Arizona. And then at 4, we see another edge go off. A guy who actually has my edge 3. I have Nolan Smith ahead of Tyree Wilson. But Tyree Wilson goes to Houston. One of the most unique physical prospects or physical profile we have seen from an edge rusher. This dude's bigger than most of the tackles he'll go. I guess at the NFL, he'll be the same size as most of the tackles he goes against. Again, 6'6". I believe he's 270, 280. And as it says here, 86-inch wingspan, which is just insane. Again, redshirt senior, so a little bit older. But again, a guy who really doesn't have a plan. A guy who goes into the pass rush and doesn't really have a plan, but if he's coached, that's when you'll see the all-pro traits start to come out of Tyree Wilson, a guy who I really just think has a super high ceiling. I mean, if you can teach this guy to be a polished pass rusher, this guy will just kind of sleepwalk into the backfield and just be a absolute fantastic piece for Houston. Again, you trade down with Indianapolis, you lose out on getting Will Anderson. We know DeMeco Ryan loves his defensive lineman. Is he not as high on Will Anderson? Does he think there's not as much of a gap between him and Tyree Wilson? We'll see. But they get Wilson here at 4, and again, a pick that I don't hate. Excuse me, the thing just is playing with me a little bit. But again, a pick I definitely don't hate. I just think when you're Houston, is it worth it here to trade down 2 spots? Again, I would like to see what their compensation is from Indianapolis here. But we'll move down now to the next pick. We'll go to see if we can get the next 2 up in here. And the Seahawks take Anthony Richardson. Again, a pick I don't love. Again, I'm not going to super critique it here. But a pick I don't absolutely love. I think if you are Seattle, I think Geno Smith could be the guy. Excuse me, it'll reload here. I think Geno Smith could be the guy for Seattle for the next 2-3 years. But Anthony Richardson, a guy who I have above CJ Stroud, I have him as my QB2 on my big board. I think he's 5. He might be, or no, I think he's 3 actually. Excuse me, super high. I'm one of the Anthony Richardson lovers. I really like him. I think this dude, again, the chances of him not succeeding are definitely higher than a Bryce Young and a CJ Stroud and arguably a Will Levis and even a Hendon Hooker. But the upside with this dude is like Josh Allen and even more athletic. Just the athletic profile from this guy is something we just don't see. So again, for Seattle, with that play action offense with Kenneth Walker in the backfield, if you can get Anthony Richardson in there within the next 2-3 years and you can develop him into a good quarterback, this dude would be just, an unstoppable player at the quarterback position. But again, I just think that floor is very low. Like, he could very easily fail. We saw it with Malik Willis last year. Again, not a great season. I've seen a lot of people say, I had someone comment on one of our videos that this guy could fall to the 3rd round. I don't think that'll happen. I think he'll be a 1st-round quarterback. But again, the question here is do teams want to take the risk with him? And then the Lions get, again, another blue chip talent in Jalen Carter, a guy you just can't miss. The only question that people have is, the off-field stuff with him, which again, I understand, very understandable, but I just think this guy was arguably the most disruptive, the most disruptive player besides Will Anderson this year, and has been one of the most disruptive players in college football the past 2-3 years. Absolutely fantastic with Georgia. Stood out on a Georgia defense that I just haven't seen the past 2-3 years. I haven't seen a defense that has pumped out so many 1st-round talents. You obviously saw Trayvon Walker last year, and Jalen Carter is just fantastic. I think he offers a decent amount of versatility to be, a 4-3 edge, or excuse me, a 4-3 defensive tackle, a 3-4 defensive tackle, and then maybe even play edge on the 3-4. Super disruptive. I think the Lions, nail the head on here. I always mess up that phrase when I try and say it. You can ask anyone else. But I like the pick. I think it's a smart one there for Detroit. You're not going something crazy. You get a good pick here. And then we move down here to 7 and 8. And the Raiders go Peter Skoronski, again, a guy who I think will translate as an inside offensive lineman. I graded him and I scouted him as an inside offensive lineman. He's 6'4". I think he's a little too small to be a tackle. I do think he can do it. I think he offers that versatility. I'm sure he'll line up at both at the next level. But the Raiders get a home run pick here. Skoronski, to me, I think will be the first offensive lineman taken. This dude is just so good. A lot of people, the comparisons are like some of the greats. He's getting compared to some really, really good players. I forgot what the comparison I saw on another podcast, but a guy who he's up there. He's a guy who could be a generational talent at the offensive line position, which is not a thing we throw around often. I think the last guy we probably said that about was maybe Penei Sewell, and that was 3 years ago, right? Yeah, it's 3 years ago. That was 2020. But Skoronski, again, a guy who I really love. Raiders get the pick here. I think corner might be a better value selection, but again, the Raiders obviously, the last offensive lineman they drafted was way too high, Alex Leatherwood, and did not work 2 years ago. And I don't think he has a team right now. I like the pick here. And then the Atlanta Falcons take who I have as my edge too, Nolan Smith from Georgia. Again, a guy I love. I think he's the best the best run defender of the edges this year. And again, a guy who's not super big, so super surprising there. I think him and Tyree Wilson are close. But I like Nolan Smith, again, a guy who's super bendy, will translate more as a 3-4 outside linebacker at the next level, which, makes sense just for his size. He's 6'2", I believe, I might be 250, I think. I might be off a lot, but I believe that's what he's listed at. So, again, a guy, and again, what I really like about him is, you look at all the teammates, glowing reviews from him, leader, a role model, senior at Georgia. Again, defensive line, that was just fantastic. The production wasn't fantastic this year. I believe he had 5-6 sacks. But again, I think he might be a guy who you draft to be that physical player at the run game. And a guy when I was looking at his game film, I watched 2-3 games, a guy who drops into coverage a lot and is pretty good at it. So it depends on what the team's value there. But the Falcons kind of need a Vic Beasley replacement. And I think you can look at the similarities between Smith and Vic Beasley. Again, Vic Beasley was super productive. His first year at Atlanta, And then the Chicago Bears here, interesting pick. They go Christian Gonzalez out of out of Oregon, a guy who I thought would go number 7 to the Raiders, but he falls here, first corner taken. I have Witherspoon graded above him. I like Witherspoon considerably more than Gonzalez. I have Gonzalez at my 2, but again, ideal size. Will be able to line up with the number 1 receiver no matter the size. Obviously, transferred from Colorado and was fantastic. Really, really good. I think there's, again, like they say, a lot of needs, but I don't love the cornerback selection here. I think you could look at, again, I guess it's actually tough. I think corner may be the pick here. I think if Will Anderson and Jalen Carter aren't there, I guess Gonzalez makes sense. I could see a trade down situation here, but I do like the pick. I just think Gonzalez offers so much. The Bears have been, generally known as a really good secondary. You have Jalen Johnson. You nailed on some picks last year. So I think it definitely is a pick that I like, but I think there might be a little more value. It depends on how it all falls come draft day. Then at number 10, again, a guy who I've seen mocked a lot here, and the Eagles have the luxury of getting whoever the hell they want with 2 first-round picks. You just don't see this team in the Super Bowl with 2 first-round picks, and they take Bijan Robinson out of Texas. I think he's the best running back we've seen since Saquon Barkley. This dude, and that's why I have him comp to. The size is there, the agility is there, the elusiveness is there. A guy who will make the first man miss, a guy who is really hard to take down. He'll just add a cowbell back to a Eagles team that doesn't even need that. Like, he'll add to that rushing offense so much. Obviously, they lost Miles Sanders to Carolina this offseason. This would be a home run pick. Speaking of that, he has home run ability. Bijan Robinson is my RB1. I think the two top running backs in the class, him and Jahmyr Gibbs, are fantastic. But now we move down. We get some interesting ones here. We'll move down. We get 2 quarterbacks off the board, and Hendon Hooker goes before Will Levis to the Titans. I really like Hendon Hooker. I have him at my QB5. I think I'm higher than the national average or the national consensus for Hendon Hooker, a guy who was super productive at Tennessee. Obviously is 25. I believe he's a 6th-year player at Tennessee. Obviously coming off the torn ACL. I believe he's supposed to be back by August. So I like Will Levis here. If I'm Tennessee, I even like letting Tannehill's contract run out and go and getting a guy like Paris Johnson. But I like the pick of Hendon Hooker, and then the Texans go. I was actually just watching a mock draft that happened as this that came down to this same scenarios. They get Will Levis from Kentucky, a guy I really like. I think he's the best at reading defenses in the class. Really smart quarterback. I think he has the arm. It's just a little bit of decision making. It's kind of just like, why did you throw that ball? And it was so funny because I think I was watching Emmanuel Forbes highlights, and one of Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback out of Mississippi State's best highlights is his screen pick six he had off Will Levis. So the decision making there for Will Levis is a little bit questionable. And I would assume he would be thrown into at least a contention for the starting quarterback in Houston. So I like the pick. I think Will Levis is definitely the value is there. I don't think that's, you're looking at that pick and thinking, oh my God, whereas Hendon Hooker, I think that's very high at 11 for him, especially for a 25-year-old who just tore his ACL, to, put your first round pick in that. But we will see as we'll move down now to 13 with the Jets and then 14 with the Patriots. And the Jets get a really good pick here. Broderick Jones, a guy who I know they like. We just posted a Jets mock draft to go check that out where we had hopefully a Aaron Rodgers trade there, but they get Broderick Jones. I think he's the highest potential, unless you're counting Skronty as a tackle. I think Broderick Jones is the highest ceiling. Again, not too many games. I believe he only had 13 games as a starter for Georgia. Maybe it was 19. It was either 13 or 19. I think it was 13 for Georgia, but super good at the next level, really fluid, can mirror pass rushers very well. Again, a guy who I think is a high ceiling. Again, a guy I believe who offers versatility as well when I look at his tape as right and left tackle, which I think is not the status quo for this class. I think a lot of them are position specific. I think they're either right or left tackle, like Paris Johnson, like Darnell Wright. So I like Broderick Jones here. I think Paris Johnson would be a better pick just for talent wise, but I think you can't really go wrong with either of them. I also have Darnell Wright as my number one tackle, which I guess is a take there. Then the Patriots at 14 go Devon Witherspoon. I mean, this dude to me is Denzel Ward. This dude's Jair Alexander. This dude I think will be an immediate lockdown quarter. You plug him in on an island against your number one receiver. People worry about the size. I believe he measured in at 5'10" at the combine. But, the ball skills are there. This dude, the route squeeze, so good at, catching breaks, really good instincts, really good hands, just everything you would want in a corner. Is he a Patrick Surtain or an Ahmad Gardner? No. He's not one of those insanely top 5 pick. He fell a little bit here, and I wouldn't be surprised if Witherspoon fell a little bit. And I do, I have him ahead of Gonzalez, but I wouldn't be surprised, and it happened here, if Gonzalez was taken ahead of him. But I think, especially for the Patriots, that's such an ideal situation because I've seen so many mocks where, there are, the first 3-4 corners are taken before here. But we'll move on now to the Packers, and it seems like every year we're looking at, take a receiver, take a receiver, take a receiver. And they do here with Jackson Smith and Jigba, a pick I actually do think would make a lot of sense. I'm not a huge fan of Njigba. I have him as my wide receiver 5. I just don't see the ceiling. I think his floor is arguably the highest in the class. I think he'll come in and be a really good receiver. So I actually like the pick. I like the fit with Green Bay, especially if Jordan Love, is the starter there. Really good at creating separation, but I think he sits down in zones. I don't see the speed very much, but I do like Njigba. The stats are there. The numbers are there besides this past year where he only got 5 catches due to injury. I like the pick there, but we'll move down now to Washington where they take the first tight end, Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. Again, a guy who I think, is very receiver-like. You look at Michael Mayer, bigger frame. Darnell Washington, really big frame. Sam Laporta, big frame. Dalton Kincaid is more of a slimmer guy. Not slim, but smaller. Kind of more of a receiver type than the other guys. But I really like a good pass catcher. I don't like the pick here. I think a pick like Deonte Banks would make a ton of sense here. Maybe even a Joey Porter, like a cornerback. But I think it's they'll take what they can get. I don't hate Kincaid. I just think it's a little high for him at 16. I'm not super high on taking tight ends in the first round unless they're elite, which this class obviously is really good. That's just my opinion. And it's kind of biased just because I get bored by tight ends. But we'll move down now to the Steelers, where they go for Ohio State offensive tackle. It might scroll down a little bit here. Excuse me. We'll just go back up there where they take Paris Johnson out of Ohio State, a guy who you look at the build, prototypical. Like if you were to build an offensive tackle in the lab, it would be him, 6'6", 310 pounds, the best at mirroring pass rushers in the class. Just really, really good. And I think this is ideal for them. I think Pittsburgh wanted an offensive tackle. I was watching another mock draft, I believe it was the NFL Stock Exchange mock draft, and the tackle options here at 17 for Pittsburgh were really bad, and I think that it could come down to that come draft day. I think there could be a run on tackles before they go at 17, but again, I think it's a home run pick here. You get arguably the best tackle in the class depending on who you talk to, so I really like the pick. And then the Lions going for their second round pick, they load up on defensive backs here. Excuse me, they didn't load up. They have some good defensive backs. They obviously let go of Jeff Okudah to the Falcons. They get Joey Porter. Again, I think if I'm the Lions, I think you should go Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez earlier, but they do get Jalen Carter, so I can see it. But even if I'm the Lions and I'm seeing Witherspoon fall to 14 to the Patriots, I'm trading up to 13. I'm getting up there in the draft to go and take Witherspoon. I'm just not as high on Joey Porter. I have him as my cornerback 4. I have Deonte Banks ahead of him, who hasn't been taken yet. But Porter's ideal size, 6'2", 200 pounds, really, really good. Just, again, a man-to-man corner I think offers a lot. I think his hips are a little too tight. I think you look at the other top guys, I think they're more fluid athletes. I think Joey Porter is the lesser of the athletes of the top 4 corners. But I still like the pick. I still think Joey Porter is definitely a good corner, a guy who I think, could be very successful in the NFL. But I like the other guys more. We'll scroll down here. It is taking a little bit. My thing is lagging a little. Let me know what you guys think of these picks so far, as we'll just let it go down. I might actually refresh it here to move it down a little. Here we go. And speaking of Deonte Banks, he goes at 19 to Tampa Bay. They re-signed Jamal Dean, they may have let go of Jamal Dean. Oh no, they did. They brought back Jamal Dean, lost Sean Murphy-Bunting to the Titans. But I really like Deonte Banks. This dude is, again, speaking of unique prospect size, like he's just a built in the lab type of size. He is, to me, just such a good blend of size, strength, weight. So good at breaking on the ball, good tackler, really good athlete, really good feet. I just love the athlete in him. To me, it's, definitely athlete is what stands out to me. And I think you look at Jamal Dean, really good athlete, really fast. Deonte Banks, I believe, ran 4.36, I believe. That might be off, but I think it was in the 4.3s. Really fast, a guy who I think just makes a ton of sense, like a really mentality to be that, a cornerback 1. And I don't think he'll be forced into that role, which I actually think is good for him. We'll move down now to 20, where I can see it. We scroll down, we saw it, and it's Van Ness. If it'll load here, excuse me, this thing. My computer is, if you guys hear it, it is on fire right now. We'll try and move down here in a second. All right, excuse the technical hiccups, but we get Lucas Van Ness to Seattle, a team I think will be looking for a edge rusher in this class. Van Ness, a guy who I wasn't super high on. We did our first Path of the Draft episode, and we were looking at Daniel Jeremiah's 3.0 mock draft, and they had the Eagles, I believe, taking Van Ness at 10. And I was like, no, this dude's not a first-round talent. I don't like him. Then I looked at some game tape more. I looked at his game against Ohio State. Easily the best pass rusher on Iowa when he was on the field. Again, a guy who never really started, I guess you could say, just because Iowa have some weird seniority starting thing, and he's a redshirt sophomore. But this dude is, you look at guys who can convert speed to power, so good at it. Bull rusher, will be really powerful at the next level, needs some training. But I think for Seattle, you look at a team that hasn't had an elite pass rush since, I guess, the Legion of Boom, and even then it was more the secondary that I guess standed out. I think Van Ness is a really good pick here. I think it's great value at 20, a guy who a lot of people think could go earlier. And then the Chargers load up on weapons for Herbert. I would love Jahmyr Gibbs here, a running back, just because Austin Eckler's future is uncertain. We have Michael Mayer, really, really good pass catcher. I think the best pass catcher in this class, has kind of the pass catching ability of Kincaid, arguably better, and really good size. Really good at pass blocking. I would say not the best. Obviously, Darnell Washington is the best in the class, but I think Mayer's a great pick. You give a safety blanket to Justin Herbert, a team we thought would go receiver last year, maybe the year before, and they just haven't really done that. But I like the pick for Los Angeles here. I think it makes sense. Second tight end off the board. Again, another thing that's really interesting is how many tight ends will go come draft day. And then we move on now to 22. The Ravens take Darnell Wright, my offensive tackle one. I think this dude's a freaking dog, 6'5", 333 pounds. So powerful. I love the comparison to Trent Williams from San Francisco. Again, Darnell Wright, a guy, if he can channel his anger and a little bit of that, sloppiness, could be such a good tackle. Again, lacks a little bit of it in the second level, but pass protecting this dude is, you can't go through him. Really, and erased Will Anderson. And it says it right here, like erased him against when they played Alabama. I really, really, really like Darnell Wright. I think this dude's the best tackle. I think he should be the first guy taken, but I do expect the fall. But I think if you're the Ravens, you might be looking for edge. I think corner you might be looking for here, and I think receiver. Speaking of receiver, a guy who I think they could go for, Quentin Johnson or Jordan Addison, who falls to 23 of the Vikings. And there is their Stephon Diggs replacement. Addison, to me, is very similar to Stephon Diggs. Again, they obviously also lost Adam Thielen. But you pair him up with Jamar Chase. Imagine. If you pair him up with Justin Jefferson, and that's just ridiculous. Jordan Addison, so good at creating space. Not super fast, not an insane deep threat, but when you look at the ability to create space, arguably the best guy in the class. It was used as a gadget at USC. They ran him the ball a lot. They threw him pitches. They threw him reverses. So I really, really like the pick here. You kind of replace some of the receivers you've lost over the past years. So I think it's a great pick for Minnesota. And we continue here for the Jaguars. I think this is the ideal pick. As it says here, I think it's either offensive lineman or defensive back here, and I think Brian Branch is the ideal pick. Obviously, they got Tyson Campbell, who's been pretty good last year. They let go of Shaq Griffin, and they get Brian Branch, a guy who is extremely versatile as a defensive back. Really defines a defensive back. Like, not a safety, not a corner, but can play both, can play in the slot, can play as safety. Only 117 snaps, I believe, as a safety. Like, definitely a guy who is kind of like a CJ Gardner-Johnson, where he comes in and plays as a slot more. So I really like the pick here for Jacksonville. You get a versatile guy on the back end of that defense for a team that's made the playoffs, won a playoff game, and is looking to make a push to the Super Bowl within the next 2-3 years. Moving on now to my New York Giants, where we take Zay Flowers out of Boston College. I love the pick here. I'm so happy he fell. A guy who I have as my wide receiver too. Again, in addition, I think Quentin Johnson might be a smarter pick because we lack size in the position. We already have a Wan'Dale Robinson. We got Jamison Crowder. But Zay Flowers to me is kind of a more fine-tuned Jalen Hyatt, a guy who you will see if he goes in the first round here. Super fast, really, really good release, really good hezzy step to create separation, incredible vertical threat. Like you look, and not that's a little misleading, really good vertical route running, deep route running. This guy's fantastic, can gash defenses, fast, elusive. I really like the pick here. The size, again, I just think we could look for a guy like Quentin Johnson, who obviously offers something completely different than Zay Flowers. But I do think I would not be upset with the Zay Flowers pick come draft day if I were Giants fans. And then we move on to an interesting one. Our division rivals, Dallas Cowboys, take Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama, a guy who transferred from Georgia Tech. And I was scouting recently, yesterday, him and Bijan Robinson. Jahmyr Gibbs to me is the comparison to him and Alvin Kamara is uncanny. Like, they are so similar. You look at size, you look at ability. Like, every single run he makes the first guy miss. His ability to shift and his cuts are perfect. Like, perfect. His home run ability is amazing. This guy's ability to change direction to me, I think, is. So I love the pick here if I'm Alabama. Or excuse me, Alabama will like the pick if he goes. I love the pick if I'm Dallas. You obviously lost Zeke. I do think him and Pollard are a little similar, and I think Pollard will go into that 3-down back, and Gibbs will be a guy who kind of rotates in for Dallas. But we'll move it down here. Let's just quickly see where he goes. We're getting to the end of the draft. Obviously, I'm super upset that there's not 32 picks. To me, I get weirdly upset about that. We bring it back up here with the Bills, who get Myles Murphy out of Clemson. I'm not a huge fan of Myles Murphy. I don't like the 2022 tape. I like the 2021 tape, but I don't love I just don't love what he brought. I do think he's very similar to a Jadeveon Clowney. I just think his ability to finish is very, very poor. So I don't like the pick. I like the prospect. I like the upside. I don't like the pick. Excuse me. That we'll leave it there. I'm going to confuse myself more. I don't love Myles Murphy. I have him as my edge, like 8. I think a guy who I think will be a first round guy, but I don't think the value's there for him. Again, the size makes sense. Speaking of size, the Bengals go get Darnell Washington out of Georgia. They already got Irv Smith. This dude is this offensive lineman, not like a slimmer offensive lineman, 6'7", massive, 280, I would think, can catch the ball, can run. We've seen him hurdle a guy. This dude to me is you look at physical specimens, like I don't understand how human beings get this big. But again, a guy who I really like. His run blocking, like he's another offensive lineman when he's in the field. You look at him, I was looking at his tape. I was looking at Broderick Jones' tape, and you look at Darnell Washington, I'm like, is that an offensive lineman? And it's not. Fantastic at pass blocking. So I think that might be very valuable and can catch. So that might be very valuable for a Bengals team that has Joe Mixon and will be looking to run the ball. But we'll move down as we near the end of the draft, as we have the Saints, and this is the pick that a lot of people didn't get. And that's the Saints taking Jonathan Mingo out of Mississippi. Again, a guy who I just haven't scouted that much, so I don't know the pick, and that's why I don't love it. But, again, a guy who I think could make it a bigger receiver in a class that is not very big. But they like it. He says it here. New Orleans in late round one feels right. I'm not super connected in the NFL, so I guess that's what it is. And then at 30, the Eagles take my edge for Will McDonald, bendy, Harold Landry. Like they get basically another Hassan Reddick, a guy who played inside. He's not an inside guy. He's 6'2", he's 6'4". He's like Nolan Smith, just taller. But again, bendy. Like this dude warps into the backfield, really good. A speed rusher, not a powerful guy, lacks that in his game. But obviously the Eagles have so much on the defensive line that he'll just slip in there, but may not be an immediate starter. And at 31, the Chiefs go, and they finally take my wide receiver 1 at last pick in the draft, Quentin Johnson out of TCU. This would just be, I wouldn't want to see this if I'm, Patrick Mahomes with Quentin Johnson, a guy who is so big but really good after the catch. Again, a guy who I've seen falling in the first round, which I guess I can understand, but I love Quentin Johnson. As I said, my wide receiver 1 in the class, but I think the pick's great. You add a weapon to Mahomes that is physically really good, contested catches, makes a ton of sense. And that wraps it up for Peter Shrager's 1.0. Let me know what you guys think down below, and I want to reiterate it. We are going live for the NFL draft, so make sure you guys are here. Make sure you're ready to go. April 27th, 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. We will be going live talking to you guys. Pre-draft coverage begins at 6 p.m. and the draft begins at 7, so make sure you are here. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Kean McDermott, let me know what you think of the mock draft, what you thought of my analysis of it, and we'll see you next time.